Welcome back to On the Same Page. We are on Daf Lamed Amud Beis 30b of Maseches Taanis. We're on the second line of the page, the last word of the line. It says Tanan. We learned Hasam. We learned over there in a Mishnah. This Mishnah is in Psachim. It says Makom shenagu lasos melacha b'Tisha B'av. In a place, if you live in a place where the minhag, where the custom is to work on Tisha B'av, Osin, then it's permitted to follow the custom and to work on Tisha B'av. Malkam shenago shelo lasos, but a place where the minhag, the custom, is not to do work, ein osin, you shouldn't work on Tisha B'av. Ubechol makom, and the Mishnah says that anywhere, talmidei chachamim b'teilim, Torah scholars are idle, and it seems to be talking about from work, not just from learning, but from work. If they had day jobs, they would be idle. They would take off on Tisha B'av. So Reb Shimon Gamliel says, "Olam yaseh kol adam atzmo kitamid chacham." A person, with regards to this, should comport themselves like a Talmud Chacham, like a Torah scholar, and not work on Tisha B'av. Meaning, even though in certain situations we might say that it's what we call yuhara, it's like arrogance to assume that a person is the level of a Talmud Chacham, but for this, Reb Shimon Gamliel says anybody can do it, and the Gemara says, Tanya nami hachi, we have another brisa to this effect. Reb Shimon Gamliel says, Li'olam yaseh adam atzmo k'tamid chacham, a person should comport themselves like a Torah scholar with this regard, kadesha yisana, in order to afflict themselves, because it's Tisha B'av, it's a day of mourning, and the more intense your afflicting is and mourning is by not working, so not behaving like it's a regular day, so the better. So with this regard, a person can behave like a Talmud Chacham even if they aren't quite on that level. Tanya Idach, the Gemara says we have another brisa that's related to this. It says, Reb Shimon Gamliel said, Kala ochel b'shoseh b'Tisha B'av ki'ilu ochel b'shoseh b'Yom HaKippurim. A person who eats and drinks on Tisha B'av, it's comparable to someone who eats and drinks on Yom Kippur, which of course is extremely severe, and the Torah prohibits it. The chiyuv kares, excision, the Torah gives a harsh punishment for eating on Yom Kippur, and Tisha B'av is a rabbinic enactment after the destruction of the temple, of the first temple in the time of the Nevi'im, but still, it rises to the level, the severity, according to Reb Shimon Gamliel, rises to the level of eating on Yom Kippur. Rabbi Akiva says, Kol ha'oseh malacha b'Tisha B'av eino roeh simin bracha le'olam. One who works on Tisha B'av does not see any blessing from that work. Some have a switch here, and they have that Rabbi Akiva said the first statement about eating and drinking. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel was the one who talked about working, consistent with the previous brisa and Mishnah that we quoted, where Rabbi Shimon Gamliel is the one who says one shouldn't work on Tisha B'av, they should make themselves like a Talmud Chacham, and here he says that you won't see blessing from that work, from that whatever's earned on Tisha B'av. The Chachamim Omrim, and the Chachamim say, the sages say, Kol ha'oseh malacha b'Tisha B'av, if a person works on Tisha B'av, ve'eno mis'abel al Yerushalayim, and doesn't properly mourn for Jerusalem, the destruction of Yerushalayim, eino roeh b'simchasa, will not merit to see the joy of the rebuilding of Yerushalayim. Shenemar, as the verse says in Yeshaya, it says, Simchu es Yerushalayim, rejoicing Yerushalayim, begiluva kol ahaveh, let all those who love it also celebrate it. Sisu ita, rejoice with it, masos kol hamisablim aleha. The rejoicing of all those who mourn over it, those who mourned over it will rejoice. This, I guess, is a prophecy for the future rebuilding of Jerusalem. It's specifically those who mourned over it that it says will rejoice over it. Mikar Amru, from here, they said, Kol hamisabel al Yerushalayim, anybody who mourns over the destruction of Jerusalem, Zoche veroeh b'simchasa, will merit and see the joy of its rebuilding. V'she'eno misabel al Yerushalayim, but one who does not mourn over Yerushalayim, eino roeh b'simchasa, will not rejoice in its rebuilding. Tanya nami hachi, we have another brisa that relates to this. It says, Kol ha'ochel basar b'shoseh yayin b'Tisha B'av, anybody who eats meat and drinks wine on Tisha B'av, Allah hakasav omer, about him, the verse says, Vatahi avonosam al atzmosam, that their sin was upon their bones. Now, what do you mean, one who eats meat and drinks wine? If you eat or drink anything, it's a problem on Tisha B'Av. So actually, Rashi and other Mefarshim say it doesn't mean on Tisha B'Av here. It means if you eat and drink meat and wine at the Sudas HaMafsekes, which we discussed last week, the last meal before Tisha B'Av, even that, it says, Vatahi avonosam al atzmosam, their sin will be upon their bones. The Marsha actually says that this means that after a person dies and their bones rot, and their body rots, and their flesh is gone, so what remains is the bones, and there will be some kind of imprint on their bones that basically shows that they didn't mourn, or they didn't treat Tisha B'Av with the proper respect. They ate and drank wine the eve of Tisha B'Av at the Sudas HaMafsekes. Okay. The Mishnah said the following, it quotes here, Rabbi Yehuda Mechayev B'Kfiyas Hamita. Rabbi Yehuda required that on Tisha B'Av a person turn over their bed. B'chachamim v'lahodu el chachamim. And the chachamim, the other sages, did not agree to that. It's not required to turn over your bed. Says the Gemara Tanya, we have a brisa, Amru lo Rabbi Yehuda, they said to Rabbi Yehuda, Lidvarecha, according to you, that you have to turn over your bed, Ubaros umenikos mate alim, what's going to be with pregnant women and nursing women? What will be with them? You're going to make them turn over their beds, it's uncomfortable enough, and this is going to be very difficult for them. So how can you require that you flip over your bed and sleep, I guess, on the floor? So Amar Lahem, so Rabbi Yehuda responded, Af ani lamarti ala biyachol. No, I only meant those who are able to do it should do it. I didn't mean that a pregnant woman has to sleep on the floor. She could sleep in a comfortable bed, but others who are able to do it should sleep on the floor. Tanya nami hachi, or again, should turn over the bed. It could be that that's just a way of making your bed more uncomfortable. Tanya nami hachi, we have another brisa. It says, Moder Rabbi Yehuda chachamim, Rabbi Yehuda agreed to the chachamim b'she'eno yachol. Like if you're not able to turn over your bed, then you don't have to. Umodim chachamim Rabbi Yehuda b'yachol. And then the brisa goes on and says that the chachamim agreed to Rabbi Yehuda when you're able to. So he agrees to them that you don't have to when you're not able to. They agreed to him that you do have to when you are able to. So ask the Gemara, what are they arguing about? Everybody agrees to everyone. So my beinayu, what's the difference between them? Ikabenayu shar mitos. The difference is with regards to other beds in the house that aren't being used. Kedetanya, like we have a brisa with regards to regular mourners, it says Kisha amro lichvos hamita. When it said that you have to turn over the bed to the house, lo mitaso bilvad hukofa, not just your bed, el kol mitos kulan hukofa. You're supposed to turn over all the beds in the house, and so therefore, the mourners, but not just the bed that you're using, but I guess it's a sign of mourning when you turn over all the beds. So therefore, Rabbi Yehuda is saying that on Tisha B'Av it's the same thing, that you have to turn over all the beds. The Chachamim say no, just your bed. If you're able to, you don't have to do all the beds. That's the machlokas between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim. And how do we paskin? We actually paskin like neither of those opinions. Amar Rava, we rule, says Rava Hilchasa, the halacha is Ketana Didam, like the Tana of our Mishnah, the Chachamim of our Mishnah, who said Lo Hodu Lo Chachamim, they didn't agree, and he understands but Lo Hodu Lo Chachamim Kol Iker, they didn't agree at all. There's no requirement on Tisha B'Av whatsoever to turn over your bed. Tosfos does mention a custom that he says you should limit your joy and make things a little bit more difficult for yourself. And so if you usually sleep with 2 pillows, you should only sleep with 1. And he says the pregnant women and nursing women don't have to do that, but a regular person should either, if you sleep with 2 pillows, you sleep with 1. If you sleep with 1, you should sleep with none. You can sleep on your bed, but make it a little bit less comfortable. I think this is brought down by the Ramah in the Shulchan Aruch. Amar Rav Shimon ben Gamliel. So now we go to the last section of the Mishnah. The last section of the Mishnah, Rav Shimon ben Gamliel said, Lo hayu yamim tovim li Yisrael kechamisha asar b'av v'yom HaKippurim. There were no great yontifs in Israel like the 15th of Av and Yom Kippur. These were the greatest days of joy for the Jewish people the 15th of Av and Yom Kippur. So the Gemara wants to know, what is the story with the 15th of Av? It says, Bishlama Yom Kippurim. I understand why Yom Kippur is such a day of joy. Mishum de'isbei slicha mechila. Because it's a day of atonement and forgiveness. God forgives us on that day. Of course it's a day of joy. And how do we see that? Because it's Yom Shenitnu Baluchos Ha'achronos. It was the day that the Jewish people were given the second set of luchos. You see, the people worshipped the golden calf. And Moshe came down the mountain on this. That was on the golden calf, and Moshe coming down the mountain and smashing luchos. That was on the 17th of Tammuz. And then Hashem wants to destroy the Jewish people. Moshe goes up and davens for them for 40 days. And on the 1st of Elul, 40 days later, Hashem accepts Moshe's pleas for them. And then Moshe goes back up the mountain for 40 days to get the second set of luchos, to form the second set of luchos. And he comes down on Yom Kippur. And that's when our relationship with Hashem is reaffirmed with that second set of luchos. That was Yom Kippur. So I understand Yom Kippur is a great day of joy. But the 15th day of Av, what's special about that day? Why is that a great Yom Tov? So the Gemara has a number of suggestions. Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel. Rav Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel, it's a great celebration because Yom Shehutru Shvatim Lavo Zeh Bozeh. It was the day that they permitted different tribes to marry into each other. Because originally, the Torah says that with the story of Tzlafchad and his daughters, Tzlafchad died, his daughters, there were no brothers, there was nobody who would get Tzlafchad's inheritance. The daughter said, we should get it, and Moshe asked God, and God said yes, the daughters of Tzlafchad should get it. But then the tribe was worried that, their Shevet was worried that then if they marry into a different tribe, then that land that's supposed to be in their tribe is going to be given to a different tribe. So indeed, Hashem commands they should only marry within their tribe. And the pasuk says, the Gemara quotes, "My darish." What did they darshan? It says, "Zeh davar shotziva Hashem livnos tzvachad v'gomer." It says, this is the matter that Hashem has commanded the daughters of Tzlafchad. And what does it say? It says, "Latov beineim tiena lanashim." They should be wives to those who are good in their eyes. Achel mishpachas not te'avim tiena lanashim, but only within their own tribe. So originally they were commanded to only marry within their own tribe, but they understood that davar zeh lo yeinoik ela b'dor zeh. They interpreted this that it's only true in that generation, because it says zeh hadavar. This is the matter. So the sages of that time, I guess Moshe or Yoshua and the next generation, said this is only for this generation of the first generation to enter the land of Israel, but not for future generations. So that's one answer. That's why it was 15th, and that was on the 15th of Av. That's why it's a great celebration. Amar Rav Yosef, Amar Rav Nachman. Rav Yosef, the name of Rav Nachman, says a different idea. Yom Shehuter Shevet Binyamin Lavo Bakal. The 15th of Av was the day that the tribe of Binyamin was allowed to start marrying again into other tribes. Because in the days of the Pilegesh Begiva, the story with the concubine of Giva, where the people of Giva violated this woman, and the other tribes got very angry, and Binyamin came to the defense of the people of Giva, and there was a civil war, basically, terrible time, and the Jewish people, the rest of the tribes of Israel, were all very upset at the tribe of Binyamin, and they swore not to marry from the tribe of Binyamin. Shenemar, the pasuk says, "V'ish Yisrael nishba b'mitzvah leimar." The men of Israel, they took an oath in mitzvah, saying, "Ish mimenu lo yitem bito leBinyamin leisha." No man should give his daughter as a wife to people from the tribe of Binyamin. And they took an oath, and they weren't going to marry into the tribe of Binyamin. But on this day, the 15th of Av, they continued to permit it. How so? They took an oath. My darsh, what did they darsh and what did they learn out? Amarav, Rav said, "Mimenu v'lo mibanenu." The oath was, "Ish mimenu," a man from among us, shouldn't marry into the tribe of Binyamin, shouldn't give his daughter into the tribe of Binyamin. However, they learned out from us, we can't give our daughters, but the next generation, our children, can give their daughters, and they can marry the tribe of Benjamin. And that was permitted also on the 15th of Av. It was cause for great celebration. Rabba bar Chana Rabbi Yochanan. Rabba bar Chana says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, a different idea. Yom Shekolubo Meisei Midbar. The 15th of Av was the day that people stopped dying in the desert. Really, they stopped dying on Tisha B'Av, we'll see, but it was the day that they knew everybody had stopped dying. So, what's the story with this? So after the people sinned with the Meraglim, with the spies, which occur on Tisha B'Av, so Hashem says anybody between the age of 20 and 60 is not going to enter the land of Israel. And each year on that day, on the day of Tisha B'Av, the people knew that's when the people would die. And I think it was whenever the people were about to turn 60, or whoever was 60, so they would die on Tisha B'Av. So what they would do is they would dig themselves a grave and sleep in it and die in their graves, and whoever, I guess really the implication here is that it wasn't necessarily known what age different people would die on that day. I guess if you knew that you were going to die, you would only, if it was only the 60-year-olds, only the 60-year-olds would bury themselves or would lie in their graves. So it seems like maybe it could be anyone. The people would die on Tisha B'Av, so they would dig a grave, they would lie in it, and the next morning they would wake up, and or some would die and some would wake up, and whoever waked up, it was great. They got to live another year. So finally, in the last year, so nobody died. It was and that's how when they knew that this generation would be allowed to enter the land of Israel. But they thought, when nobody died, they thought on the 9th of Av, they thought maybe they got the date wrong. And it wasn't yet the 9th of Av. So the next night they did the same thing on the 10th of Av. And still nobody died. And the 11th and 12th. And they kept doing it just in case they got the date wrong. Until finally they saw the full moon on the 15th. And they knew that the people had stopped dying. And that was cause for great celebration. This would be the generation to enter the land of Israel. So on the 15th of Av, they knew this and they celebrated it. And the pasuk says that Ad shelo kalu meisei midbar v'haya dibur in Moshe. Until the people did not finish dying in the midbar, God would not speak directly to Moshe. Prophecy for that whole period of time, from God to Moshe, the whole time that from the Meraglim, from the spies until they finished dying, was like any other Navi, this not as direct as it usually was with Moshe. But from that time on, the word came back directly from Hashem to God, with the clarity that Moshe is known for. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, "Vayhi kasher tamu kohan shemelchama lamus," and it was after all the people of the battle had stopped dying. Vayidaber Hashem Eli, and God spoke to me. So after everybody had stopped dying, Eli haya hadibur, then God's word was direct, and again that direct communication that was unique between God and Moshe returned after everyone had stopped dying. So it seems there's really two causes for celebration. There's that they stopped dying, and then the sign of that was that the prophecy returned to Moshe, or the direct prophecy. Ula says a different idea. Yom shebitel Hoshea ben Allah prut sadios shehoshiv Yeravam ben Nevat ala drachim shelo yalu Yisrael l'regel. Ula says that the day of the 15th of Av was a celebration because it was the day that the last king of Israel, Hoshea, he removed the guards that Yeravam ben Nevat, the evil king of Israel, had placed on the roads to prevent people from Israel, from the 10 tribes of Israel, from traveling to Yerushalayim, to the Beis HaMikdash, for the pilgrimage of the Shalosh Regalim. He had built his own temples, and in Beisel and in Gas, and he wanted his people to go there. I think that's where they were, and for the Shalosh Regalim, and he put guards on the roads to make sure nobody could go. We referenced this in an earlier Gemara in Taanis. He put guards on the road so nobody could go, and those guards were finally taken away by Hoshea ben Allah, the last king of Israel. And he said, they could go to whichever one they want. So he wasn't exactly a tzaddik, and Rashi says he was a Rasha. he was wicked. The pasuk describes him as Vayas hara b'nei Hashem. He did evil in the eyes of God. But at least he now allowed for the travel of people to go to Yerushalayim, to the real Beis HaMikdash, for the Shalosh Regalim, for the holidays. Rav Masna says, Yom Shenitnu, we're on the top of Lamed Aleph now, of 31a. Rav Masna says, Yom Shenitnu Haruge Beitar Likvura. The 15th of Av was a day of celebration because it was a day that the people who were decimated in Beitar were now allowed to be buried. Beitar, during the time of the Second Temple, or really after the destruction, was a hotspot of rebellion against the Romans, and the city was destroyed by the Romans. And later, many months later, they came back. Finally, the Jews they were able to take back the city or re-enter the city, and they found that the bodies of the dead had not rotted, and they were able to bury them. And that was a great celebration and a great miracle. The Amar Rav Masna says, Oso Yom Shenitnu Haruge Beitar Likvura. That day that the people of Beitar were allowed to be buried, Tiknu b'Yavne Hatov ve'Ametiv. That's when, in Yavne, they established the blessing, which we say in benching, the fourth blessing of Hatov ve'Ametiv, Hu Heitiv, Hu Meitiv, Hu Yetiv Lanu. Hatov, Shelo Hisrichu. Hatov is, they said, Hatov, because he's good in that God didn't allow the bodies to decompose. Ve'Ametiv, and he continues to do good. Shenitnu Likvura, that they were given to burial. Not only did they not decompose, but we were able to bury them and properly honor the dead, and that was cause for celebration. That occurred on the 15th of Av. That's when they discovered the body is still intact. Rabbi over Rav Yosef, Da'amri Tarai, Rabbi and Rav Yosef, they have a different idea of what happened on the 15th of Av. Yom Shepaskum Yelichos Eitzim L'Ma'aracha. This was an annual event, an annual idea, that it was the day that they stopped cutting wood to collect for the Ma'aracha, for the arrangement on the altar on the Mizbeach. Titania, as we learn in our Brisa, Rabbi Eliezer HaGadol Omer, Rabbi Eliezer the Great said, Mechamisha Asar Ba'av Va'elach, from the 15th of Av and on, Tashash Kocho Shalchama, then it's the middle of the summer now, that's when the sun starts to get weaker, the days start to get longer. They would no longer cut wood for the Mizbeach, because they wouldn't really be able to dry properly. They had to dry out the wood to store it, to use for the Mizbeach, and it couldn't be wet, it couldn't be allowed to get wormy or anything, so they would do all the wood cutting before the middle of the summer, when the sun is still at its peak, it's the longest and hottest days, and then the wood would have a chance to dry out and it could be properly stored. But after that, they would stop cutting the wood. And why is that a cause for celebration? I guess because they weren't so busy anymore. As the Gemara goes on, it says, Amr Menashia, Menashia says, Vikarule Yom Tavar Maga. They would call that day the day of breaking the sickle or the axe, because they wouldn't chop wood anymore. And Mikan Va'elach, and from that day on, now that the days are getting longer, we say, Demosif Yosef, a person who increases in his Torah study, his days will be increased. Udelomosif, but if you don't increase your study, even though you now have longer nights, shorter days of work, Ye'asif, it says that person will be gathered in. Ma Ye'asif, the Gemara says, what does it mean he'll be gathered in? Amr of Yosef Tekavre Ime, his mother will bury him. So very harsh. The Gemara says that when the days get longer and a person has an opportunity to study Torah more, so if one doesn't take advantage of that, if they do take advantage of that, it says a person their lifespan could be increased. But if not, then their lifespan could be shortened for not taking advantage of that. But along those lines, that's why it was a celebration when they stopped cutting wood, because that meant now the days were getting shorter, the nights were getting longer, there was less work and not more play, but more time for learning and for serving Hashem, and that's also cause for celebration. So ultimately, the Gemara has a whole number of different reasons why the 15th of Av is a day of celebration. The Gemara said it's the day that the different tribes were allowed to marry intermarry within each other. It's the day that the tribe of Binyamin, even though the other tribes had sworn off marrying their daughters into the tribe of Binyamin, this was the day that they absolved themselves the oath and said it's only for the first generation that took the oath. It's the day that people stopped dying in the Midbar, or that they realized that nobody else was going to die in the Midbar, in the desert. It's the day that Hoshea bin Allah, the king of Israel, removed the guards preventing people from going up for the Aliyah L'Regel, for the pilgrimage on the holidays. It's the day that they discovered that the dead of Beitar, that their bodies were still intact and could be given proper burial, and they hadn't decomposed. And it's the day that they stopped cutting wood, and the days are now getting longer. The nights are getting longer. There's less time for the wood to dry. They stopped cutting wood, and it's a time where there's more time for a person to dedicate themselves towards Torah study and service of Hashem. God willing, next week we'll have our Siyam. We'll finish off the Gemara, and then we'll be starting the next Masechta. So please join us for the Siyam, and we'll be sending out details throughout the week.